build our growth. So without much further ado, I'm delighted to introduce our panelists today. I'm going to start with Sunil Bhaskaran, CEO of Air Asia, who's been with the Tata Group for over 35 years in key roles and leading businesses. Next to him, we have Jason Oxman, who is coming all the way from Washington to be here with us today. Thank you, Jason. He's the President and CEO of the Information Technology Industry Council. It's a global... Pranshu is which collaborates with companies making circular economy possible. And he's going to share some of his interesting ideas and stories with us today. And yes, sitting right in the center, we have our moderator, Anil Padmanabhan. All of you are very familiar with him, journalist par excellence, 35 years, and most recently also the managing editor for The Mint. And last but not the least, my colleague, Ishtiaq Ahmed. He needs no introduction, PAFI Council member, one of the core pillars of PAFI in the work that we do every day. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to Anil to take us through.
So now digital saved us. So thank you, and thank you, PAFI, for having me here. And every year I tell you this, congratulations. I know from where you started, from the little room at IIC, and now to see this really expanded, scaled up thing, fantastic. Really congratulations to all of you. What we do is I just jump into it because we just have about 45 minutes, and we got 3 speakers. So each of them will make a short introductory remarks, and then we jump into a conversation. So I just move from the right to the left.
Good morning, and thank you, Anil, and thank you, PAFI, for having me here. So 2 quick comments I would like to make. I think we had a very interesting session with the Minister, so clearly expounding the national view on how the country wants to address this towards 2047. 2 key areas I would like to mention. One is, I think we need to build on our strength, and one of the big strengths which has panned out over the last 20 years is in the area of technology and digital. And I don't think much of the world believed that a country which has an average per capita income of $2,000 could become such a leader in the high-tech sector globally. And I think that's a clear strength that we have. Many factors have come into it to make it happen, but to ensure that it moves up from this level and really can differentiate India in a much bigger manner is very important. It's interesting to note that our software exports today are almost equivalent to what Saudi Arabia exports in oil. I've heard it from many of our consult friends from the US that in the top companies' boardrooms, the conversations 20 years ago used to be about low-end IT and how cost arbitrage could make the difference. Today, everybody is investing in their top technology strategy and development and execution. I think it's clearly been shown how technology can be used at scale to address the big issues that we had. You have examples of Aadhaar, UPI, the way FASTag was implemented, the way COVID was implemented. In my own sector, in aviation, I think there's stuff which is happening, which can really show technology being implemented at scale, which can really address these issues in a big way. So I think we have a big advantage, and I think we should push for using this strength in an even bigger manner going forward. That's one, and the other part, of course, is to ensure that the growth is inclusive, and to that extent, the priorities in terms of education and healthcare is very important. That's just a quick beginning, Anil.
Great. That's extremely brief, but thank you. Jason?
Thanks so much, Anil. And it's a real pleasure to be here, and congratulations to PAFI on putting on a phenomenal in-person event. It's great to be all together, and to be able to shake hands and make eye contact is so much different than the digital world. The digital world is terrific, but there's no substitution for being together in person. I want to pick up, as Sunil said, on the exciting opportunity for the digital economy here in India. And one of the things that the technology industry is so excited about, as we heard from the Honorable Minister, is the updates that are taking place at a rather rapid clip to the regulatory and policy environment here in India. India is the world's largest democracy. That by itself is exciting. But the digitization that's taking place across India is nothing short of remarkable. And I say that as someone who had to bring their paper COVID vaccine card with them to travel to India. And I look around and over 1 billion people have their digital records available to them the minute they get their shot. I say that as someone who walked up to the desk at my hotel to exchange some currency and was met by strange looks from people around me who wondered what exactly I planned to do with cash. I say that as someone who, when asked for ID and pulled my plastic driver's license out of my wallet, why it is that that's not on my phone like it is for everybody here. The economy here, the story of digitization, is one that the world should be paying attention to. And I'm excited on behalf of the technology industry to have the opportunity to participate in it. We do have, of course, breaking news about the Telecom Act rewrite, as the Honorable Minister was talking about earlier. And I should say, Anil, I read first about it in the Mint last night. That was the breaking news outlet that I saw before getting a copy of the draft legislation.
Walk us through that change, so it will be interesting.
Thank you. Greetings to all. So I put some angle on circular economy, and we are not talking about it. It has become kind of popular around in the last couple of years. So, and what can you do? The biggest thing I think, if I were to think from a pure digital perspective, we are really running out of materials to make products. In a few years from now, we will run out of available rare earths. We will run out of multiple other materials to make diodes, capacitors. And if we have to really bring resilience, then we need to look at waste in a very different way. We need to think of products in a very, very different way. And this is not just true for electronics, we can look at any sector. Today we know where to buy products from, but we don't know what to do at the end of their life. And each and every product is dependent on natural ecosystems. And the natural ecosystems are everything right now. So, the good thing is, at least there is a great dialogue in India happening on circular economy. Niti Aayog has set up 11 circular committees and focused on specific sectors. And while, a lot of action is still to happen, but the good thing is the policy initiative is needed. What is required at this point in time is how do we add depth to the dialogue and how do we put the business person behind it. And that is something which I truly find is missing today. We have a lot of talk, but almost no action. Action is more focused on, can I just be compliant? Can I just do some PR? Can I just talk about it? Very few rare instances of real action, real drive is happening at a grassroots level. And I want to be very, very candid about this here. Now, if we are talking of change, this is a change at a population scale. I'm using the same word when the minister talked today because this can't be for a few households, for a few companies. This is really population scale. Anything that we are creating today needs to be uncreated. Let me take a very simple example of products that we all use, a laptop. Would you know that the plastics in laptop are actually unbreakable? Majority of it cannot be used to make that, if I were to recreate laptops from the same plastic, I actually can't keep it. And this is true for, if I go product by product, we would find at least 70 to 80% of the products which are non-utilizable. We cannot uncreate them, we cannot extract back materials to create new products which can go back to the economy. And this is becoming a huge challenge. I see three big solutions here. The first is the technological solutions, and this goes into, can we really redesign our products in a way that materials can be extracted? And the fact that there are technologies available for extraction, today we really don't have, not enough money has been put, not enough R&D has been done in that space. Very little money, very little, I would say, frugal innovation has been applied on that side. The second is the lifestyle and the behavioral changes. How are we selling this story? Both internally within the companies, because circular economy will only happen if all of us within the organization, whether I'm a brand manager, marketing manager, sales manager, we are all deeply enthusiastic by the idea. It will just not happen if a sustainability manager is driving it or a corporate affairs director is leading it. So how do we embed it deeply? And this lifestyle change would then percolate to individuals, to peoples, to communities who would then come forward to participate. And the third is the policy. The good news from an India perspective is that the policy dialogue has started to happen. Where it goes from here is yet to be seen. But I see a very, very huge possibility of support coming from forums like this, groups like this to be able to make it happen. Today that support, while in dialogue is there, but in real action is pushing it.
What I'll do is, we have got about 35 minutes and we'll go for about 15 minutes among us and we'll open it up for questions. So please ready your questions before that. If I had to, as a question for all three of you, Jason, we'll give you honorary citizenship digitally. And you've seen all the progress, we talked about the digital economy, etc. So these challenges before us today, what we see today, are unlikely to exist if this pace and momentum are retained in another 10-15 years. So we are looking at 2047, India is going to be very, very different. So I think it's time, like the minister said, for a mindset reset. He was talking about investments, but I think there should be a larger mindset reset in this country because there's a lot of legacy which we are carrying forward. Because that's the way we used to do. So I think we have to rethink the way we are going to do things. So in that backdrop, there is to explain issues. So then I begin. So I said, suppose we have to imagine a fundamental new process with what the minister pointed out and Pranjal also pointed out, citizens at the center. So, and leverage technology, which both of you mentioned, and of course, encourage innovation. What is it that one process that you would recommend today?
Good question. I think since the public affairs forum, I think the partnership between government can create policy and policy can come out of a lot of the conversations along with the industry, community, state, common citizens. But this policy needs to be executed better to really impact the economy. And one big enabler today is technology, like you said, which can really help policy get executed, implemented on scale. If we were to take something like education, the kind of different models which are working in all over the country, in different states, many of them are absolutely cutting edge. And I have a lot of confidence having seen them from close. That it could lead to the kind of paradigm shift or the outcomes in education that all of us are hoping, because it's not just hope. There's lots of different pilots, experiments, supported governments which are happening. So if there was one process which needs to get even further streamlined, which is entire process of consensus building very quickly, like what the minister talked about, in terms of making the policy. And then how best, not just the government and industry, but also community and finally the people. So in that space, I think the need for this partnership and where if the public policy experts are big, partners or big players in this role between the industry and government, I think apart from what was earlier expected, that these are professionals who help navigate that bureaucratic maze. It needs to be more about potential business leaders within the industry and within companies taking on those roles to ensure that there is better understanding between both. I think the last point that the minister talked about for the public policy students was about building trust, and I think that's a very important part for public policy professionals to build that credibility both within the company. Because they are carrying the company's views across the bureaucracy, but much more for the bureaucracy to have trust that this is coming from deep understanding of the industry, deep understanding of the ecosystem and what the interplays are, and therefore suggestions which could come out with better policy. I don't know whether I addressed your question, Anshul.
Sunil, I think I just raised the difficulty quotient for you. So, because I know it's an off the syllabus question, but it's something I thought of on the way and I heard the minister. And so I just want to actually take advantage of the kind of background that all of you come from. And So, Sunil, you're a CEO and you're a change agent. So my question is, but beginning actually from Ishtiaq also triggered it when he asked the minister that what is it that we can do. So it's in that context that what would you do if you're CEO of a company and there's one single process that you want to change, which is not for today. I'm talking of not even tomorrow, I'm talking of 1 week, talking of 25 years from now. So what is it that you will change? Because these problems will go away. I think you have to start with that premise, start with the control or their moment, you know. And so what is that?
So Anil, I'll bring it more specific to my industry, in aviation, and I think the biggest problem, which is we don't see in India so much, is about the sustainability perspective. And mentioned over there, I think it's far closer to the people on the ground if you were to be in Europe or US, but it's not so much so here in India because all the key parameters will start taking in from 2027. And today in an industry where you're really trying to survive, it's difficult to try and spend effort on aviation, on sustainability. And sustainability in aviation, unlike other industries where there are 10 parameters, 99% of that comes from the use of fuel, which needs to be, for the flights to take place. And to get an answer to that, there is a lot of industry-wide initiatives which are very far in the future, but the biggest solution seems to be sustainable aviation fuel. And towards that, I think the kind of work which we are trying to get all participants, whether it's the civil aviation sector, whether it's the petroleum and natural gas sector, whether it's Indian Oil or the oil companies, whether it's new age companies which are looking at investing in this. So although the problem is way far ahead in the future, the conversation on how to build the policy parameters, how to build the support parameters to get it, manufactured in India. India has some potential advantages compared to the rest of the world, but today the cost of that fuel is 5 times what the normal fuel is. So it looks like, out of reach and impossible, but it's a solution which needs to get done over the next few years for aviation to be sustainable. So within this particular problem, within this specific initiative, I think we are seeing good traction between these ministries. Ministry of Road Transport is also involved, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Ministry of Civil Aviation, the industry. Only yesterday, the Tata Airlines, which is Air India, AirAsia India and Vistara, we signed an MOU with the Indian Institute of Petroleum, which is part of the Council of CSIR, and they have very leading edge pilots and work happening today, which will lead to some of these things. And again, my confidence is extremely high that we will probably find solutions in India ahead and different from the rest of the world. So I'm just seeing a specific, piece to address how it would be, and I think the process is working well. It is far away, but the pain is being felt. The industry, research, government, partnerships are working, and the conversations are happening.
Thank you.
So I look at this from it's a great question, thinking ahead and counseling our students about what they should be thinking about to advocate 10, 15 years from now. I think I view this from the perspective of an Indian startup, the technology sector. And thinking about, as a startup, if I want to enter this exciting innovation economy, what do I need from the government? How do I want to position myself vis-a-vis the government? This is something that companies across the technology ecosystem face all the time. And as the minister said, the whole philosophy behind the re-examination of the regulatory environment here in India is to make sure that the next generation of technology companies, and there's some great tech companies up here on the sponsorship list that are members of ITI, great technology companies across India, but we're talking about the next generation, building the next unicorn. What do they need from government? So the proper role of government, of course, is to make sure the environment is conducive to those startups having a chance, making sure they have access to the capital they need, making sure that new entrants can compete with legacy companies. And thinking about the Telecom Act back in 1885, the telegraph was it. So the role of government in setting the environment there with a monopoly provider of service was very different than today. And I think making sure that the government understands, in the case of technology, making sure AT understands what's necessary to compete, to be successful 10, 15 years from now is enormously important. One of the parts of a statute that people tend to kind of gloss
also going to get into the meat of it, is the definition section. And I would encourage everybody to look at the definition section, because we all have it in our packets, of the new draft telecom bill. The definition section is actually incredibly broad and suggests that new companies that are entering the telecom space include companies that are internet providers, content providers, video providers, satellite providers, companies that are not traditionally within the regulatory ambit. Play in regulating legacy service providers who may have access to things that the government can give. For example, spectrum, which belongs to the people of India, but the government licenses it out. It's obviously appropriate for the government to regulate users of spectrum. Even legacy telecom companies, even if they're competitive today, not owned by the government, they have access to rights of way and other benefits of government. But all those new ecosystem startups that now may be subject to licensing requirements and other obligations of government don't have any of those legacy benefits. So for the startup ecosystem, that's the kind of thing you need to think about. Am I going to be subject to licensing requirements? Am I going to have to share my data with government as a result of this new telecom bill? 15 years from now, if you have those obligations on you, your business is going to look very different than it would today if you didn't have those obligations on you. So those are the kind of things that I think are important to think about. The definition section, again, something that you don't usually read, but in something like the new telecom bill, incredibly important to think about how that impacts the ability of innovative startups in India and what government regulations they may be subject to as they attempt to enter the digital economy.
I think what is this need of, the history of this to what do I do when it completes the end of its life, to any possibilities related to it. And what is my motivation to do it? Sometimes you can feel the motivation for an individual is only money. And at times we have always thought of, if we have a deposit refund system that will bring back the whole product, it is working. If we start looking at literature and review systems, it is not always the money, it is about how are we shaping the context in which people are operating. And that context will be created not just by offering some money, but by, creating campaigns, making it a part of our regular communication package. And today that is absent. Even when we talk about sustainability or about product returns, we talk it, in a small, tiny line about advertising. So that is a category. It's not mainstream, it is not being discussed. And again, how will it be funded? So ultimately everything goes back to who's going to fund it. And so one of the interesting things which I'd like to share on this part is we did some study on focus on at least a few sectors. What's the cost of going circular? So which means that you are doing a complete end-to-end solution on right from creating technology to putting it on the market to getting your products by getting them recycled, reutilizing the material. What we found is the majority of the sectors, the cost is, and when I use the term cost, I am loading it on the average selling price of the product. So the increase in the average selling price of the product is from 0.1% to 2 to 3%. For some categories it may be higher, but we are talking relatively petty cost, something which can be written off. But still, when you convert it to a company level, it becomes humongous. And that's where there is resistance to change. But I think unless we start passing this cost to consumers, because this is minute, and also communicate the benefit of why this enables a huge change at a societal level, this is not going to happen.
That's a great point.
I'll see you.
See you here. Good to be here. We have a whole set of credible sessions.
Can I request all the delegates to please take their seats?
Everyone. Good afternoon as well. Thank you, PAFI, for giving me this opportunity to deliver the welcome address speech in the partner state for this annual forum, Tamil Nadu. This is also my home state. So you can see that I am doubly delighted. The epicenter of the ancient global maritime trade, Tamil Nadu is the cultural hub of the cosmopolitan community and endowed with a highly skilled workforce and best-in-class infrastructure. Tamil Nadu is also the second largest state economy in India, contributing almost 10% of the national GDP with less than 6% of national population. With its investment-friendly policies, and focusing on skilling across a range of sectors, Tamil Nadu is an excellent role model for other states. It is the only state in India to have all its districts covered under industrial corridor projects with an aim of developing globally competitive and future-ready cities. In line with the forum's scale, speed, and sustainability for India rendered, the deliberations will focus on Tamil Nadu's policy on economic agenda towards making it a hub of manufacturing and investments for the next 25 years, its sunrise sectors, as well as setting up of Guidance Tamil Nadu, which is the nodal investment agency to attract, promote, and celebrate investments in the state. I take this opportunity to welcome Mr. S. Krishnan, Additional Chief Secretary, Industries, Investment Promotion, Commerce Department, Government of Tamil Nadu, and Srimati Pooja Kulkarni, MD and CEO, Guidance Tamil Nadu. Moderator of this session is my dear friend Priya Sehgal, Senior Executive Editor, Newsex, and vote of thanks will finally be delivered by my honorable friend Anil Kumar Singh, Managing Member, PAFI and Group Head Corporate Affairs, Asian Paints. Over to you, Priya.
Thank you so much.
You guys are doing all this, but people in Delhi don't know what is happening. I come back to a hall where I think there are a number of old friends, people I have interacted with over the years that I spent in Delhi as well. And sometimes you really do feel that there's a lot about this country which the elite in Delhi doesn't know about. And Tamil Nadu is one of those interesting, long-term, strong, silent performers. When I joined the civil service and when I was in the finance department in Tamil Nadu in the early 90s, and our objective at that point was to try and get as much money out of the government of India as possible. And the best way of doing that was to establish that you were below the national average per capita income. And I recall that in 1992-93 we were still below the national per capita income and we got a decent share out of the modified capital formula. But the next year, much to our consternation, it looked like that we were going up beyond the national average per capita income. This is just to set a context that we were just about where the national average was about 30 years ago. Today, I think it's a matter of pride. We stopped trying to stay below the national average per capita income. And today, it's a matter of pride that we are probably about 80% above, comfortably about 80% above. And probably one state which benefited the most out of the reforms of 3 decades ago, the 1991 reforms, was Tamil Nadu. And we were positioned, I think, through a number of historical factors to take advantage of what happened thereafter. Point was made about the bureaucracy in the state and what the bureaucracy does to maintain continuity. But I think it would be wrong not to ascribe a significant amount of the credit to the political economy as well. You know, the politics of Tamil Nadu is interesting. I mean, they can contest a number of issues. But one of the points of contestation is also which government does more to encourage investment to come into the state. So which basically means that any investor who comes into the state never suffers. Successive governments. I recall this, in 95, Ford approached us for investments, Hyundai approached us for investments, 96 the government changed. But nothing changed for those two companies. They got everything that they were promised and they established and they've continued to thrive in different ways. This is one key point that there have been a number of events where I have confidently asserted, even in the presence of the ministers, that I can assure you saying, if you are an investor and you come into Tamil Nadu, it does not matter if the government changes, because the policy continuity, which is linked to investors, continues. The second important or key element that falls into this framework is that it is a system of checks and balances. It is a system of different departments which need to come together to deliver. And that is one of the reasons why, as part of this entire effort of moving forward in terms of economic development, we actually established Guidance Bureau, It's called the Guidance Bureau then. Now it's just called Guidance. It was established in 1992 and it's now existed for almost 30 years. We probably took a lesson out of the books of many of the public affairs professionals. That, what is it that we're basically doing? We're educating people on why a particular set of policies are important. In a democratic system, the interests of various interest groups need to be clearly articulated so that those who make decisions figure that out and go forward. And similarly, within the government system, which represents multiple interest groups as it is intended to do, there's somebody who represents the Labor Department, somebody who's environment and forest, somebody else who's public health, somebody else who's a range of these particular issues. We needed somebody to educate them all around as to how do you sort of, while taking care of the concerns that you have on the environment front or on the town planning front or on preserving water resources front, how do you move forward with a larger agenda of economic development? So how do you balance both of these? That was one thing. The second important element of growth in our growth strategy for Tamil Nadu is inclusiveness. Now this is intended to be growth for everyone across the state. We are a large manufacturing state and we actually want to grow the share of manufacturing even further. We are also a large services state and human resources is the main resource that the state has. A few years ago, the President of the World Bank met our then Chief Minister, and in the course of conversation, the issue that came up was Tamil Nadu is supposed to be this populist government, a welfarist state. How do you reconcile the fact that you are a welfarist state with the fact that you require to be business friendly or that you are business friendly? How do these two things go together? Typically, either you're a welfare-oriented state or you're a business-friendly state. And back came the reply that there's no contradiction at all. It's because we follow welfarist policies that we have the quality of human resource that we have, and that's what leads to further economic development, and that's what makes Tamil Nadu a destination of choice for investments. It is still true. The social dividend which comes out of many of the measures that the state government puts together is what then leads to prosperity both for businesses who want to establish there and the quality of the human resources that we find. And now when our gross enrollment ratio in higher education is about 51%, it's almost twice the national average and it's higher than what the United States has, for instance. We have a challenge in terms of finding jobs for people at that end of the spectrum and for people at the lower end of the spectrum, which is why there's emphasis simultaneously on certain service-oriented industries. We have a policy which I will talk about shortly on research and development, how do you encourage more global capacity centers to come there, capability centers to come there, how do you encourage investments in that area. We also export a lot of that human resource. Mr. Aravindan here as an example. But if you, a quick head count in a neighboring state capital, which is not more than 50 kilometers from our state border, will show you that almost 30% of the human resource there comes from Tamil Nadu. And even further afield, you have a substantial human resource component which moves out of Tamil Nadu. We could push. And our own traditional strengths in textiles. It's interesting that almost 60% of the spinning capacity is in Tamil Nadu, and you wonder how, given that we neither grow cotton in substantial quantities nor do we have other sources. It's the way our power policy, or more specifically our renewable power policy, was designed all those years ago that led to this situation. Capacity today is renewable, and we have the highest renewable capacity in that sense. These are all moves and these are all positions that the state takes in order to make sure that we are inclusive.
in order to make sure that growth works for the people. And the point of contestation is always, what is it that we have found for people? Have there been enough jobs created? Are they finding employment? And now to push historically also, this is one of the few states in the country which is not unbalanced in terms of developments. We have a number of cities, second and third tier cities, which are prosperous areas. In addition to Chennai, you have Coimbatore, you have Madurai, you have Trichy, the areas around that, Tuticorin, which is a big port city. Industrial presence across the state, which is something which has happened historically. And the per capita income differentials amongst the districts is not as great as it is in many other states. That is one big plus, so which means in the post-COVID scenario, we are also looking at a relocation of industries more widely spread across the state, because people, the human resource prefers not to move further out, and they would rather find jobs close at home. And we are enabling that. We are enabling that through creation of infrastructure, through creation of various other measures so that industries and also employment can come there. That's how the industrial policy is also fundamentally designed. The other element, of course, which adds to the strength of the economy is diversification. Just as there is a regional balance, diversification in terms of the types of industries which come, and that is the real strength. Across about 15 to 20 major sectors of the economy, diversification means two things: that there is a well-trained talent pool which can always sort of move, and the second part of it is that it also implies that we are fairly resilient as an economy. If one sector suffers global headwinds or some issue of that nature, there's always another sector which can pick up the slack. Actually had a positive growth rate of the state. It was marginal, but at least it was positive and not negative. And a lot of it is also the industries in the state which continue to function through the COVID period. We made special efforts. At that point, it was not in the industry department, I was in the finance department. I chaired a committee which would interact regularly with industries and make sure that we enable them to work through that entire COVID period, through even the worst of the lockdowns. And I think all of those supportive measures, a lot of which is possible only because you have a government and you have a political economy which understands the importance of what investment is and understands the importance of having an enabling business environment, that we are able to deliver the kind of growth consistently over a sustained period of time. There are undoubtedly challenges, there are undoubtedly issues which we need to address, but I think there is a systematic way in which these issues get addressed on an institutional basis as opposed to getting done on a one-off basis. There's this one person who will say that this has to be done, so everyone falls in line. Asking more of them come in and as they come in, they are comfortable when they are in Tamil Nadu. I'm sure Pooja will have a lot more to say about this, and I'll stop here and maybe take a couple of questions later. Thank you.
I hope to be able to interact with you on a business basis, not just those who I already have, but everybody who's gathered here. The Secretary has already outlined why we are where we are. I'm just going to give you a brief presentation on the nuts and bolts of how it works. One, about guidance. We are the oldest investment promotion agency of the country, 30 years old now, and going strong. Some of it has already been said. And in terms of population, in terms of land area, we are about 6%. We are not exactly blessed by natural resources, but yet we contribute nearly 10% to the GDP. It's a reflection of the efficiency of the state. Our greatest resource is really our human resource. Now that we don't have natural resources, that's what we've made best use of. And that same efficiency, that same gets reflected in the productivity of the industry that's in the state. A unit which is in Tamil Nadu does much more. The same unit elsewhere, anecdotally, I mean, you know better. What the same unit delivers in Tamil Nadu is far higher, and that same productivity is what reflects in our numbers too. Not blessed with natural resources, 6%, and yet we contribute 10% to the nation's economy. Number of factories, again, historical strength. We have the largest number of factories. Our strength is really our SME ecosystem, which is why the automotive sector, the electronic sector, the engineering sector, all of these were there as SMEs supplying the components. We have about 40,000 SMEs registered in the state, and that's the largest number. And the number is continuing to grow thanks to the OEMs that have come in. So it's become a virtuous cycle. The SMEs, the ecosystem brought in the OEMs came in with newer vendors, and it's a virtuous cycle that we are reaping now. Infrastructure, land. Most of what I say is not a self-certification. These are facts and data from reports that have been published by the Government of India. So the Industrial Land Survey report that came out last year, it showed that Tamil Nadu has the largest available industrial land in terms of extent in hectares and acres. So most of this land is developed, industrial land. Our agency SIPCOT develops the parks, and land is readily available for investment, and it's not concentrated in any one location. Across the state, we have the parks. We now have multiple hubs at Chennai, at Hosur, at Coimbatore, and then further down south at Tuticorin too. The ports, the connectivity, 4 ports, 3 at Chennai, 1 at Tuticorin, and then the airports, 4 international airports, the only state to have that kind of connectivity. The airports are also strategically located in all 4 regions of the state. Power surplus again. In terms of renewable energy, we are amongst the 10 largest hubs in the world.
Presentation. One was the entire ecosystem, industrial ecosystem, which is very much sustainable, and also in terms of inclusiveness, whether it is from the gender parity point of view, whether from the renewable energy ecosystem that is there. We all cooperate, look for enhancing our SDG goals, and I think Tamil Nadu offers that very much there. The continuity of policies, and we all are left very much impressed whether the institutionalized mechanism so strong, whether there is a political regime which changes or not. What we learned today is not about competitive federalism, but how constructive political competition prevails there in Tamil Nadu. I'm between you and lunch. So I would like to propose the vote of thanks. May I request Talu to kindly hold the token of appreciation.